Welcome to another episode of This Was Supposed to Be Easy.
We've had these conversations on at least 1,000 car rides and thought it might be time for other people to join us. This is Cheryl.
And my name's Amy.
Okay, Amy, today I have a scenario to run by you and see what your reaction is.
Okay.
So, your adult daughter calls to say she's quitting her stable job at a law firm to launch a handmade candle business out of her garage. She's lit up, excited, and full of vision. Your reaction is instant panic. Now, I know, Amy, both you and I probably would be like, bring on the candle making. But, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Put yourself back over here.
Okay.
Instant panic. You're calculating how much she'll lose in retirement contributions, health care, and job security. You want to support her, but your face gives you away before the words even come out. So instead of listening, go into consultant mode. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about a business plan? What about your 401k? Maybe you should start smaller, like on Etsy, and keep your job for now. You're not mean, but the energy shifts and she suddenly is deflated. She pulls back. You don't hear from her as often as you typically do. And you're definitely noticing that she seems more guarded. And fortunately, you can think through it enough to realize that you may have been the one to make her feel like her dream wasn't valid. Even though you weren't trying to control, you were just trying to prevent heartbreak, maybe financial destruction, but it came across like fear and not love. So later on, you call her back and you'd say, I want you to know that even though I don't fully understand this choice, I support you. I trust you and I'm here to cheer you on. And I'm sitting here reading this scenario to you, Amy, thinking, ooh, if you could have saved yourself before you had to go all the way to, I'm here to support you and I trust you, because it's kind of hard to backpedal a little bit
Oh,
when that happens, if you know
it
what I'm
is
talking
hard.
about.
I do know what you're talking about. That is so hard. And I feel like you just, mentioned you gave a scenario that could be on every sitcom of like the mom role of wanting to fix something for their child and then fix something for their friend or their spouse or, I mean, I think as women, we tend to be fixers. And especially, rooted in a whole lot of trauma and all of that stuff, you can go to multiple places to find, but especially when we've been good at it and we've been rewarded for it, right? I mean, there are times that I know within my own life that the fact that I could fix a scenario really gave me my accolades. Like people were saying, oh, thank you. We couldn't have done it without you. And every time I felt like a little bit of like, oh, yeah, I had something contribute. My value, my worth was wrapped up in it. But I also know I have hurt relationships too by stepping in. And when I probably should have just kept quiet and supported or listened, then and said, well, have you thought about this or have you done this? And as someone who values themselves as a coach, getting out of the consultant role, the one that seems like they have it all together and they have all the information, that was a hard process for me. I did about a year of therapy working on this topic to kind of come around from being the fixer and to let people fail. And that was okay. And knowing that that was okay.
Gosh, I want to hear more about all you learned from the therapist, because I mean, you're so right about, I think sometimes as women, I think it's really closely and deeply connected to that whole you're being selfish if you're doing something for yourself. So you always need to be doing things for other people. And that fixer role falls so naturally into I've got to be doing something. So, I'm fixing things for other people, but also the teacher role, right? Like you and I have both been teachers, and it is hard to shift from I'm teaching, or the idea of I'm teaching as a way of passing on your knowledge, versus the way we both think about teaching now, which is helping people come to solutions and test things and try things. It's a very different way of thinking about teaching. But, a lot of our traditional activities have moved us into that. Let me just tell you, Let me
Right.
just
Your life would be so much better if you just did what I said, right?
Yikes.
But that's not true, and I think too, what's really hard about it is and it's not doing those things out of a oftentimes we do it because we wanna spare somebody pain,
Mhm,
right? We're fearful of what might happen because we can see in our head all the negative things. In that example that you gave, what about your 401k? What about your stability? What about this? It's kind of all of those preconceived ideas of our values versus maybe that daughter in that scenario values creativity.
mhm.
Maybe they value something else, but we're saying, no, we value the support. We value the need for a sure thing. I think we see a lot of this now too with generations. Like when we start talking about generation conversations and the expectation that we've kind of made a switch over the years from being in one job for your entire life. Like the job that you get out of high school or college is the job you go into, and then it's security, and you move your way through that job for years and years and years, growing kind of up the ranks to now individuals getting a job might have 5, 6, 10 jobs over the course of a lifespan, but also then each of those number of jobs in the different career paths. And you might switch full on careers
Yeah,
numerous times. We know that there's numbers out there supporting that. And that's something that, a certain generation might not be able to even comprehend because the life that they led was you pick your job and you stay with it because it's a sure thing forever.
yeah, I do think about how it was for me versus how it is for my young adult children and just the whole workforce and career and how you search for a job, everything is so different now, and to realign my thoughts, not to identify exactly with what they're going through, but to be open to things are different now. And there is, you mentioned, maybe she just needs that creative outlet, that can't, the creative candle making outlet. But also, I've had certain roles where I'm sick to my stomach when I get out of bed and I don't want to have to go do the thing I have to do. And that can go way beyond I want to spend more time being creative to this is impacting my health in a very serious way. And I'm so grateful that the current younger generations are better maybe than my generation is at saying, "Oh, I'm gonna make a change then,"
Right.
because it's more acceptable.
Yeah, and having that kinda flip. And I think too, also, we really need to think about the idea of so if we wanna be there for somebody, and
Mm,
we want to give them our love, what might that look like in the way of supporting them
yeah.
versus steering them to make the decision that we think is what's best for them? And I see this a lot when it comes to individuals that are younger than us, especially our own children, where we don't want them to experience pain or hurt, but I also think about that when sometimes we do that with friends, right? Like
Mhm.
we might see our friend ready to make a decision that we might call stupid or, "Oh gosh, what are they
Or
doing?"
dangerous or
Dangerous, right? "Oh, don't go out with that person. Don't make that decision in life. Don't do the thing." And we might try to steer them away from it, but what happens when we do try to do that? We
Mhm,
might not be left with a friend
mhm.
afterwards, or our friendship might completely change.
Well, and I just have to ask myself, is it my business?
Right.
And right, and why am I feeling so compelled to step in and say something or do something, right? So, I think we have this innate built into us, whatever it might be, fixer reflex a lot of the time.
Mhm.
Definitely some of us more than others, but where does that come from?
I think so too. I mean, I know we know it some of it comes from trauma. There's a lot of, like I said, books out there that would say that. I think there's a lot of learned life through experience that we've experienced. And I think this is also something, I mean, I know Mel Robbins has a book out right now on the let them theory.
Mhm,
And I do recommend reading that, and there's a idea of, let the person make the choices that they're going to make, and then the flip side is let me. which is then I'm going to hold the boundaries that I'm going to hold when you make the decision that you're going to make. And I try to stay out of comments because I find myself really frustrated. And but I have to share this one that I read, and it was this person was really, really angry about the book, and they totally missed the purpose of it. But in the comment section, they said, I think that this is a terrible advice because if you let somebody go about making all the choices that they want to make, then we never correct their behaviors. And then we allow people to put themselves in positions that they shouldn't be in because we didn't say anything.
We
And
allow people to. There's
yeah,
so
we
many
allow
things.
there's so many things in that comment, but I found myself could have probably had a whole podcast only I would listen to it about that one comment. But I really ran with it and thought with it, and that one, the person missed the whole read the book and clearly missed it. But two, the idea of the greatest gift we can give somebody is allowing them to be authentically who they are. And so if we are constantly stepping in to shift their behaviors and shift their thought, they are not living their authentic self. They're living through the version that we want them to be. And so
Mhm.
we are never truly getting to like them, love them, support them as who they are because we are only seeing them through the lens of who we think they should be. And that is really heavy of a burden to bear or to carry around if that we feel like we have to live in or show up only in the lens that other people think of us. But we expect that. And so I often say, like, I tell my kids all the time, don't make anybody's life harder today. And
Ooh,
so when we talk about like, hey, have a good day, those types of things, I was always saying like try to make somebody else's life easier. And sometimes they would get a little miffed about that. So then I changed it and I said, you don't get to make anybody's life harder. Meaning when you go to school, don't make your teacher's life harder. When you're going, on the bus, don't make your bus driver's life harder than it needs to be today. They already have their own issues that they're carrying around. And so I think about that. And I would say that whenever we impart our feelings on somebody else's doings, we are making their life harder in the guise of thinking we're making it easier.
yeah, yeah. In fact, well, first of all, I have to get past feeling pretty shallow right now because when my kids walked out the door, I said, "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." And, then I got the reaction, "Well, that means I can do anything." And, until they did do things I wouldn't do, and then the whole conversation shifted, but we can
Right.
talk about that another time.
I mean, that's
Um,
another episode, right? Yeah.
it is, but really, yeah, I mean, this is going to sound harsh, but it is so disrespectful to put our fixing ideas, to put our stamp on someone else's journey. And
Yeah.
and maybe put our stamp on it is the wrong way to say it because we do all influence the people in our immediate circle, but there's indirect influence and there's inserting yourself where you shouldn't be.
Well, I think too, we're making an assumption. The assumption that's being made is that I have it figured out. Well, somebody else could turn around and be like, "You don't have it figured out. Why are you dishing out advice that you have no business giving?" I mean, so it would be me assuming that my way is the best way. And my way might be the best way for me,
Mhm.
but it might not be the best way for the other person. And also when we do that and we tell people how they need to do the thing, we also set ourselves up for the opportunity that we can be blamed then when it doesn't go right. Like if you tell somebody, oh, let's say somebody has a job opportunity and you say, oh, you absolutely should take that job. That job is going to be amazing for you. Financially, it's so much more money. Well, let's say on the flip side, yeah, the job is so much more money, but now that individual is working 65 hours a week. They're exhausted, they're burning out, and they're looking at it being like, you told me I had to take this
Mhm.
job.
Mhm.
And so when we tell somebody you have to do this or you should do this or this, how could you not do this? This is the only option for you. When we jump in with any one of those things, we also offer up the opportunity for the other person to come back and be like, you told me to do this and it did not turn out the way I thought it was. And
Mhm.
so we can put the blame back on us then. Or sometimes if we just keep our mouth closed, but I think too, it also goes back to the idea of why we can't let people feel their feels. Like, why is somebody else's discomfort so uncomfortable for us if they are making a choice that we disagree with? Like, what part of the choice is really at the core of what we disagree with?
Yeah. You just make me think about the importance of working to listen more. And by listening more, we can understand the other person and their perspective better. But I think that we also hear our own inner monologue and thoughts and feelings, and maybe can get to that question that you just asked about the true discomfort and the true cause. There's just so much to be learned by listening, I think. That that's what we teach when we're teaching others to teach, right? Like,
Right.
listen to the children. It's what you do when you're coaching.
Hmm.
You're asking questions so that you can listen for the real answer.
So that makes me think, we just went and saw Hamilton, and that quote, that famous line of, talk less, smile more, which I think really is just saying, hey, take it in. You don't need to comment on everything.
Well, and a smile's an invitation, right? A smile is an invitation to share more of what you're thinking, and I'm here for you. I'm listening. And so I think it's a great quote, Amy, to practice respecting other people's processes.
Yeah. And I think too, the other thing that I have really had to work on for myself and recognize is one, not so kind of a two-parter here. One, not taking my identity from being the fixer anymore. Like that, we've talked in the past episodes about identity and what our identity and where it comes from. And I think so often we lean into that if we are seen as the person to fix and we get a strong purpose from that, then we do it more and more. But the problem is that really becomes then the quintessential version of codependence. And we don't want codependence. We don't want people to depend on their life being lived through our version of their life. Like, we don't want somebody to not be able to make a decision unless we say that they can make that decision or they should make that decision. We want people in our life to be whole versions of themselves anyway. And so if you're not okay unless you're with me, or you're only okay because I told you what to do, and we have this back and forth, and then I'm only okay because I had a purpose in your life, that's codependency. And that is something that I think we need to really take a look at of if we're approaching these problems with a let me fix it, and if you're not okay, then I'm not okay helping mentality, then that might be something to take a bigger look at.
Yeah, I think, even just giving ourselves some, how we do affirmations and, just things to repeat to ourselves, but, little scripts just to have in our back pocket to be ready to show our interest, demonstrate our caring without building the codependency, right? But the
Mhm.
actual detachment from the actual decision making part of the process. Little not the right way to say it even because they can be really big words, but, "I'll be here for you no matter what you decide," or
Yeah.
"I trust you to make the right decision for you."
And I think even with that is how can I support you? What does support look like from me?
Amy, I know that you've told me that you have a saying that you use often in your family when your kids come to you to help you make decisions about your reaction. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I must kind of preface it with it was not something that happened overnight by any means, but now what I do and I've really done for the last couple of years is I've asked the people in my family, my spouse, my kids, how do you want me to show up for this conversation? And what was amazing is oh, I mean, I had been doing this for a while and one of my kids came to me and said, I really need to be angry right now. So, can you give me 5 minutes of supporting me in my anger and then we can workshop what to do? And I was like, yep, sure. Like that is totally fine. And we did that. And I was angry right alongside them in a like, yeah, that's really hard, affirming their feelings and doing that. And then when they said, okay, now I think I'm ready. This is what I want to do next. And okay, like
Wow.
what do you want to do? And of course, I was very much in coaching mode then, like kind of went into it, but allowing them to feel their feels, being uncomfortable with them being uncomfortable,
Mhm.
and then letting them have the space to tell me when they were ready to shift over. And then I could kind of, that dance, I could go along with them to support them on the next part of that conversation without me ever saying, you should do this. Have you
Yeah.
tried? What are you doing here? But asking, some of those open-ended questions and also it's such a gift for myself now too to know how they want me to show up for this conversation because when I ask that, then I don't have to try to figure it out. It's very clear. I need you to be my cheerleader right now. I need you to support me right now. I need you to give me a hug and tell me nice things about myself. I need you to get really angry alongside me. I need you to be supportive or, I need you to help me do the thing. Any of those types of things are appropriate, but also what I think is so important is that they know how to do that now and to take that on to whatever future relationship they're going to have, their future friendships, their future romantic relationships, any of those types of things as a skill set that's already been kind of ingrained with them.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds to me like they've lived that conversation so many times that they now have this wisdom that they can continue to use as they work on moving through their own path, right?
Right.
You've stepped back from thinking that it's your job to protect them from their path, and you're there supporting them and imparting a whole different kind of wisdom and maturity that they can take with them.
Yeah, and I think what's really a key piece there in what I think of like parenting is kind of switching as when they're really little, they need protection. The
Mhm.
world is a really scary, scary physical space for them when they're infants and toddlers and kids. And then emotionally, it can be really scary for them as teenagers and young adults. But in the same way that you are not going to put a toddler in a bubble and not them let them explore, you're not going to stump them as a teenager and not let them feel feelings. And so if they have experiences and opportunities to feel feelings and learn how to handle and deal and support those, then they can be the best versions of themselves when they come around to it. But my goodness, this has been a journey of how to get from the fixing standpoint to the idea of letting someone screw up, feel their feels, do all the things kind of in between, and support them in a way that feels appropriate and authentic to myself, not
Mhm.
in a way that is me going against any boundaries that I've created.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like a good year of therapy.
It was.
So, leaving this conversation, some of the takeaways. Fixing, which is such a tendency in so many of us. Fixing isn't the same as loving, which also means that not fixing isn't the same as not loving,
Right. So
right?
important. Thanks for tuning in to This Was Supposed to Be Easy. Remember, the best stories are the ones we live.
Join us next time as we uncover more tales and thoughts that just might change your world while we navigate those things that we didn't expect to be so hard.
Stay curious, stay connected, and keep wondering.